that came from Buckminster Fuller, the wonderful inventor. The trim tab is the little tiny rudder that you see at the bottom of the larger rudder that steers the ship. The ship is capitalism. The big rudder is American companies, and you, the real leaders, are the trim tab. The work you do is inspiring those larger corporations to take action in really new and incredible ways. I want to take you back to the world before COVID-19 and tell you some of the headlines that I was seeing that was giving me inspiration. Because what we were starting to do was finally tackle some of the biggest problems in the world, whether it was income inequality, whether it was the rise of hate, whether it was the climate crisis. What we were starting to see was some of the largest corporations on the planet, inspired by your example, start to take action. We saw Tesla surging past the $100 billion mark, ironically in the same week that oil hit negative $37 a barrel. A piece of serendipity I could not have predicted. That was just wonderful to see. We saw Microsoft announce that it was planning to reverse all of its emissions during the lifetime of its company by 2050. We saw that these companies like Delta and JetBlue pledged to become carbon neutral. We saw IKEA start to do amazing work around transferring itself to become an avatar of the circular economy. We saw Starbucks pledge to provide free college education to thousands of workers. And perhaps my favorite example is Adidas, who's one of our clients, starting to solve the problem of ocean plastic by creating these sneakers you hear today, starting to generate billions of dollars from solving one of the most complicated parts of the human ecosystem, which is the crisis of plastic as well. So all of that was giving me hope. And then we had COVID-19 hit. And what we're now seeing is crisis on top of crisis, unemployment, the rise of food insecurity in the United States, the second silent pandemic of mental health starting to sweep the nation. We're really in a moment where we have to think long and hard about the resilience that we have as companies, as individuals, and how that resilience is a responsibility to those people out there who are struggling right now in this day and age. What we're starting to see is that consumers have high expectations of brands wanting to help. So every piece of research I've seen is that consumers are saying they want brands to step in now to work alongside government. And that really has a huge impact in terms of how they start to see their preference for these brands as well. By the way, I'm going to share all of this data as a PowerPoint. If you just reach out to me on LinkedIn and email, I will send you this whole thing so you can download it and reach it at your leisure. What I want to say is we may not be able to save lives like those brave men and women on the front lines, but we can save livelihoods. That should really be our goal. We are now moving past the respond phase of this crisis and the relief phase, and we're starting to think about the rebuild phase. And I want to place a thought in your heads about how we can rebuild this. And it's this phrase, this hashtag that's been going around on the internet. The Secretary General Ban Ki-moon used it. Let's build it back better. Why should we build it back to the status quo when there were so many things wrong with society and the planet? How can we build it back better? That's really what I want to talk about today. And to me, purpose is the key to reboot our society and build it back better. It's really the starting point. It allows companies to frame what they're there to do, to achieve a higher order mission than just making money, and use that as a wonderful way to help us get back to even better than we were before. A lot of you guys know this. I'm preaching to the choir on this. But let's talk a second about the business case for purpose and how we see it. There's really never been a situation in human civilization where these three tectonic shifts are happening all at the same time. One is the rise of consumers who want to buy products and services from companies that do good. Two is the rise of employees who then want to work for those companies. And three is the rise of investors who are now looking to put capital into these companies. So let's go through each of these. What we're now seeing is, by pretty much every single measure, the rise of the conscious consumer, whether it's trial, advocacy, or a price premium, consumers are saying they want to buy products and services from companies that do good. It's summed up in this wonderful quote, every time you spend money, you're casting a vote for the kind of world you want to live in. Secondly, when it comes to employees, you're seeing the entry of millennials and Gen Z into the workforce who have vastly different expectations of the companies they want to work for. What we're now seeing is actually the rise of what we call employee activism. Employees holding their corporate management accountable if they don't act in a way that is in line with their values as well. And thirdly, Wall Street waking up from Larry Fink's BlackRock letter, the rise of ESG funds. What they're waking up to the fact is that the data now shows that the most ethical and stakeholder-driven companies out there, the higher return. This is the Tory project. I highly recommend you go and dive into this data. It's 20 years with S&P 500, and it shows without a shadow of a doubt that the more ethical and focused you are in serving all stakeholders, the bigger the return as well. So the myth that doing good doesn't lead to shareholder value is rapidly being exploded. By the way, if you're looking for all of this stuff, I just wrote a Forbes article which has all of the data points and surveys you need. So go look at this. I'll send you this link out as well. So how do companies operationalize purpose? Well, we've been spending the last 3.5 years going out there looking at some of the biggest companies on the planet. And this is kind of what we found. First of all, what's happening is that all of these different threads that you saw as disparate parts of doing good in a company are starting to weave together into this rope called purpose. So these different silos you're seeing, from corporate social responsibility to sustainability, cause marketing, diversity and inclusion, all of these things are starting to ladder up to something much bigger as a trend. We spend a lot of our time helping brands and companies find purpose. This is our model. This is the Conspiracy of Love process. We spend a lot of time looking, first of all, engaging inside the left side of the screen, talking to the leaders and the employees of the company, going back to look at the origins of the company, amazing clues there, and then mapping it to what the world needs. We call this the 5 C's, going and talking to consumers and customers, going and looking at the competition and category, looking at collaborators, other nonprofits, and maybe even other brands you work with, challengers, people who really hate your brand, going and talking to them about why they hate it and understanding what we can learn from them. And finally, looking at culture, mapping it to things like the United Nations SDGs to see where your brand should focus its impact on as well. And your organizational purpose is really at that intersection point there. What we've distilled it down to, which I'm going to give you a sneak preview, is the 9 principles of purpose, how these companies are thinking about purpose as well. So let's go through them. One is they're thinking about purpose as the new digital. They are building purpose capabilities like they built digital capabilities 20 years ago. They're really understanding how they need to become more sophisticated and use the right type of muscles in order to be authentic. 2 is purpose must be built inside out. There is no point a company going and preaching the virtues to the world if it doesn't have its own house in order with regard to diversity and inclusion, gender equality, the number of women on your boards as well. It's essential to get your house in order. 3 is you have to pick your purpose swords and shields. Some issues out there are your shields. Sustainability is pretty much a shield for every single company right now. But what is your sword? What is the cause or issue that you really want to focus your company's attention on? 4 is purpose must be profitable to be sustainable. This is business. It's not philanthropy. We need to show the ROI of purpose, whether that's in revenue or brand equity or however you want to measure it. But, and here's a really great paradox, sometimes you have to be prepared to lose money in order to stand by your principles. And we've seen amazing examples from companies like Nike or Levi's or Tom's who've taken on control when they didn't need to and risk losing customers because that was what their values dictated them to do. So it's a really important message, lesson for the CEOs to learn. But purpose doesn't have to be political. There are a vast range of issues that companies can get involved in where there's broad bipartisan support. You don't have to go and touch the third rail of American politics. There's a lot of good you can do out there. Number 7, Julie referred to it as well. Purpose must be an open source pursuit. The best companies in the world share their IP. When they find something that they think can actually help the planet, they give it up. They make it open source. It's a really great principle to keep in mind. 8, purpose must measure what matters. It goes back to the ROI again. Companies need to get really good at measuring the multidimensionality of purpose as well in order to make sure that we invest in the right way. And finally, 9, purpose is a journey, not a destination. There is no fixed point where a company says, oh, we're purpose-driven enough, we're going to stop. There's always a new frontier that they need to innovate. And just like digital, there is no point where they're just going to stop innovating in the purpose space as well. So hopefully some of these principles are triggering something in your minds as well. In the book, we dive much deeper into each of these to elucidate these. If you get this right, this triggers what we call the purpose flywheel. I know flywheel is a term that's been out there, but when you apply it to purpose, what we're seeing is these three categories here. People are drawn to companies which have a higher purpose. We've seen that in the recruitment and the retention. When you give them a sense of purpose and meaning that's in alignment with their personal purpose and passions, they come up with products and services. They work harder, they're more motivated and more engaged. That allows those companies like Adidas to create products and services which throw off revenue, which then allows it to also change the dynamics of the category. The rest of the category wakes up and says, hang on a second, those guys are making a lot of money from doing good. How can we do this as well? Whether it's Adidas or Patagonia or Tesla, you see this flywheel again and again. We think it's one of the most powerful things a company can unleash. Some closing thoughts to end with. We're really in a moment where I encourage you guys to think transformational, not transactional. Elon Musk is building us rockets to go to Mars, for God's sake. We can think big. I want us to all think about this idea that abundance is the new sustainability. For companies like yours, sustainability is no longer enough. We have to go beyond. We have to repair and restore what we broke. We have to leave it in better shape than we found behind. I think all chief sustainability officers should be called chief abundance officers from now on as well. We need to aim higher. It's really important in all of this to make sure your values drive your value. There is no point doing this unless there is integrity and authenticity at your heart. And I want to leave you with this great quote from Brené Brown, who I love. We can choose courage or we can choose comfort, but we can't have both. So right now, in this moment, we have a chance to build it back better. I hope you take inspiration from this and join me and everybody else out there in trying hard to make it happen. Thank you very much.